a Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi, this is Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone, and this is another in our training support podcast series. And today we are looking at the taper. Well, this is another of those words that you probably don't use a huge amount in normal life, but the taper is a bit of a legendary stage of your running training plan. And it's a really good place to be because you know that you're not far off from race day. So taper is basically a 2 or 3 week period prior to your event. And it's at the very end of your training plan, but it is still a really important part of your training plan. It's the bit where you need to slow it all down and conserve energy. You're going to be building up your glycogen reserves now ready for the day. You're going to be probably in the best shape you've ever been in, particularly if it's your first ever race. Particularly if it's your first ever marathon, you'll be in better shape than you've ever been in, and you just want to keep running, but you can't. And this is where we have to slow it all down. So welcome to the taper. So at the start of your training plan, your schedule, you would be very happy to be at a point where you didn't have to run too much. But when you get towards the end of your training plan and you've been in the groove for weeks and you've actually really started enjoying it, you just want to keep going. And this is the fittest you've been. So therefore, runs are great. Runs are enjoyable. They're not challenging anymore in the traditional sense. You don't sit at home thinking, oh my God, I got to go out for a run. You're probably looking forward to it. And the taper period is almost the complete opposite of that, to be honest. It's the point where you have to slow it all down and conserve energy, get yourself in shape for the big day. And up to a point, the success of your race day depends on how you deal with the taper. So if you are training for a marathon, for example, your taper period is likely to be 3 weeks. So basically what that means is from the point of your longest run, so say it's a 20 miler, from that point to race day is 3 weeks. So you're not going to run any further than that. And you're now going to start cutting back quite significantly. And it is really strange because you don't necessarily want to do that. Yes, you may well have had enough of those long runs that take 3 or 4 hours, that take up most of your Saturday or your Sunday. By the time you've messed about getting ready and having a shower and you get back, all the stretching, all that kind of stuff, it's a long. So the taper period really signifies the end of that stage of your training. It's, as we said at the start, the point where your body can now start to recover and prepare itself, the building up of these glycogen reserves, which is so important. This starts to happen during this early phase of the 3 weeks. And as it goes on, so the glycogen reserves get more significant. So it allows you to get to a point where you are in 100% fantastic shape, ready for the day. If you're doing a half marathon, chances are you will be looking at a sort of 2 week taper period. And if it's a 10K, for example, or a shorter distance, then it's a week or so. But you still got to do it. But it is a really, really difficult, strange time because you really just want to keep running, but you can't. You've probably not been in this kind of condition before, and your instinct naturally is to keep running and wanting to keep running because it's enjoyable and you feel that you can do it. So to go to a point of, say, 4 hours on your long run and wind that right back in is quite strange, but that's exactly what you have to do. Or long run really goes from 20 mile down to potentially 10 to 12 miles. And then the following week, it'll go down again to sort of 8 to 10 and then down again. So this period is all about looking after your body. And importantly, it's also about making sure you don't get injured. So not only are you getting yourself into a position where you're not going to run out of gas, you do not want to get yourself injured. And I always treat this period, I wouldn't say I necessarily enjoy it, but I always look at this period as this is where I have to look after myself. I do not want to put a foot wrong because I have worked for months for this, and the last thing I want to do now is do something stupid. So I tend to take my taper period down quite significantly, probably more than is recommended, because I know at this stage, and this is really important to consider this, you know you can do it. So if you've got yourself to a point of, say, 20 miles, in 3 weeks' time, you're going to be running a marathon. You're not going to lose that fitness in 3 weeks. So up to a point, if you did nothing, you would still be okay. You may lose a little tiny bit, but not a huge amount. So last year, for example, I did the Big Sur Marathon in April. And 3 weeks before that, I went to India on a trip. And given the heat and the humidity in India, I wasn't able to do a huge amount of training. I did a few 5Ks and it didn't have any particularly negative impact on me. Yes, I would have liked to have run a little bit more, but actually that was all about enjoying the experience and doing something different. And because of the heat and the humidity, I didn't want to overdo it. I didn't want to put myself under any pressure. So my taper period in that instance was a lot longer than it would normally have been. But it didn't have any particular negative impact. It's a strange time, but it's also quite a refreshing time because you can now step back from I wouldn't say grind, but the day-to-day activity involved in training for a distance event. And you can start to look at other things related to that event. So, for example, you can start to really focus on your logistics. Have you got everything in place for your race? Do you know exactly what you're doing, where you're going and when? What time does it start? What time do you have to be at the start? Have you sorted your support crew out if you've got people coming with you? Are you looking after those guys and agreeing with them exactly where they'll be on race day? This is a time where you can start to focus on that kind of thing. And of course, if you're running for charity, here's a chance to really get into your fundraising. It's no great surprise that the bulk of the fundraising for most people comes in that 3 weeks prior to the event and a week afterwards. Now, that might just be a coincidence that happens to coincide with the taper period, but it really does give you a chance to focus in on that fundraising because this is crucial, particularly if you're running on a charity entry and you have a commitment to raise 1,500, 2,000, whatever the target is from your charity. You've got to hit that target. And this is the time where you can really focus in on it. And obviously, potential donors that you're going to be talking to, they're a bit more in tune with what you're trying to do when you're this close to race. Sometimes it can be a bit difficult 6 months out trying to get people to sponsor you for a race. But here you are, you're 3 weeks to go, 2 weeks to go, a week to go. They know you're going to do it because you've been through your training and you have been posting all these training updates and they know you're there. So chances are they're going to be a bit more committed. So use this period where you're not running as much to sort out your logistics and sort out the fundraising. That doesn't, because I've said just wind it right down, doesn't mean you do nothing unless that's what you want to do. But I tend to focus, I do run maybe up to 10 miles where I don't do a huge amount more, but only once a week. The other runs may be 3 or 4 miles a week. I do walk quite a bit at this point. So if I do say 4 sessions a week, it might be a couple of runs, there'll be a couple of walks in there as well. So I tend to walk quite a lot because I'm just absolutely super paranoid about not getting injured. And it is a real concern to me because after all of this training, the last thing I want to be doing is getting myself injured. So Sod's Law says that you might twist your ankle or whatever if you run too fast or you fall off trip over a pavement or something. Lots of things play on your mind. And when you've been working this hard for something, you just don't want to put a foot wrong at this stage. So take it easy. The hard work should be done. Just enjoy this period, which is basically get your head around what's coming, particularly if you're doing a big city centre race, whether it be a 10K, a half, or a marathon, whatever it is. There's a lot of planning involved in these things, a lot more than just driving 20 miles and doing a local 10K half marathon. These events take a lot of work and you need to make sure you get it right. Do you know what pen or corral, as they call them, are you going to be in on race day? Do you know exactly what time your start is if it's a wave start? All this kind of stuff. Get your head around it now and focus on that kind of logistical activity. So what happens if I don't get the taper right, or I just don't do it at all? Well, this is very, very common. Okay, so some people will, for example, say, all right, it's a marathon, I'll be fine with a 2-week taper. So I'll do my last long run 2 weeks beforehand. Oh, you can, but you run the risk of not replenishing your glycogen stores well enough. You may well be tired. Your legs may well have not recovered from that last 20-mile long run, if that's how far you go. You may have not given yourself enough time to recover properly. So you run a risk. You inevitably run a risk of not being quite ready. 3 weeks is the recommendation. 2 weeks, tight. A week is very, very tight. So if you decide that your training hasn't gone quite well enough and you need to keep training, and actually your long run is going to be a week beforehand, then you could be in for a very tough race day. And I'm talking from experience. My first marathon, my training had not gone well. And I just ignored this principle of this taper, and I just kept training right up until the week beforehand. And I mean, my training did not go well at all. And I stood on the start line of my first London marathon, having run only 13 miles as my long run. So 2 fundamental errors there. 13 miles as my long run, and only a week before the race. And inevitably, when I hit 13 miles, then my race was pretty much gone. I was cooked for the second half of that race, which meant it was not a pleasant experience. I just hadn't followed the training plan properly, was sloppy in a number of areas, and I paid the price. Subsequently, I've done quite a few marathons where I've only done a 2-week taper, and you can feel it. Sometimes I didn't have choice. I've done quite a few where I've done marathons, a week or 2 weeks apart, and your body just doesn't have enough time to recover. Where you've got the opportunity to have a 3-week taper, it does make a massive difference. And I think you need to be aware that if a lot of people will get ill, they haven't built enough contingency into their training, and they get ill and they have 2 weeks or 3 weeks off, and they just run out of time, basically. You're better off leaving a 3-week taper, irrespective of the longest run you've done, rather than trying to keep forcing and getting too close to race day with a long run, because you might end up doing 15 miles, but your body will not be conditioned to it and you will not have enough time to recover. So you're better off saying, right, my longest run was 14 miles. I'm just going to leave it there now. And I know that the adrenaline, the crowd support will get me pushed further on the course up to a point, but at least I will have rested my body for the required amount of time. So you need to be really careful. And if you don't get that taper right, you could have problems. And that taper also includes making sure you're still not running too much during it. So you might have eased down on your long run, but you might still be doing 4 runs during the week, and they might be 6, 7, 8 miles. Well, that's still too much. So just take it easy and wind it all down and enjoy that 3 weeks. You need to keep ticking over, but this is your recovery period now. This is your body's chance to recover from potentially 6 months of training and getting yourself in fantastic shape. Don't stress about it. You will be that proverbial coiled spring, but don't stress and enjoy that period of relative relaxation. Do a bit of cross training if you need to, a bit of rowing machine or a bit of swimming, a bit of stationary bike. That's a good way of doing it. Just keep yourself ticking over, keep the fitness going, but don't be stressing about the running.
And now it's time for Q&A.
Right, I've got a couple of questions here. Alex from Stafford says, does it make a difference if I have a 2-week period or a 2-week or a 3-week taper for a marathon? We sort of touched on that, and yes, basically, but again, it depends on the relative distances that you are running. So if your long run is 20 miles and you do that 2 weeks beforehand, and clearly, as opposed to 3 weeks, well, clearly that will have an impact on your body, and you may not have enough time to recover. But that also depends on how much you've done prior to that that last long run. So it's basically, is your body conditioned to it? Can it cope with the repeated stress? And it also, what age are you? Because clearly the older you get, the longer it takes to recover from these things. So my recommendation absolutely would be 3 weeks, but all things considered, you may get away with it on 2 weeks. Is your last long run 15 miles or 20 miles? So again, distance can have an impact, but as I said, I would prefer 3 weeks for everybody. If your last long run is 20 miles, 18, 20 miles, then really you need your body to have 3 weeks to recover and recover fully, get those glycogen stores replenished properly, and that gives you the best chance of a quality day on race day. Josh from Penzance says, do I need to taper for a 10K? Yeah, I would taper for any distance event, Josh, and I'm including a 5K in that as well. Obviously, it can be less. So your long run on a 10K, which is, just over 6 miles, should be about 4.5 to 5 miles. And your body, but because I'm assuming, that you may not have done a huge amount of training, say more than 3-4 months. Your body's still being put under pressure, and particularly if you've not done a lot of running before. And this is why you have to sort of put all these things into context. If you've done lots of 10Ks or you're a experienced marathon runner, then no, you wouldn't need to worry too much about a taper for a 10K. But if you're new to 10K running, your long run was 5 miles and you had been training 2, 3, 4 miles regularly, then you need to give your body a chance to recover. If you're a marathon runner and you're just dipping in and doing a 10K, well, that 10K might be just one of your training runs. So you wouldn't need to worry too much about a taper period for that. So it's about experience, how much running have you done, and context. Is it a standalone event you're training for, or is it part of something bigger? But so I wouldn't worry too much about it if you're an experienced distance runner. Don't worry too much about the taper. But if you don't taper and you're relatively new, then you will have a difficult time. It's actually a really good opportunity just to take stock, the taper period. Take stock and just reflect on what's coming and get everything together. Get yourself organized and get yourself prepared for what's coming, because particularly if you're doing a big city centre marathon, this will be one of the most memorable things that you ever do. And the taper is as important as any other element in your training plan. So the long run obviously is the absolute key. Gradual progression is key, but the taper is also key. And if you don't get that right, then things will be very different. But if you do get it right, you'll have a fantastic time and you'll want to come back and do another one. So hope that was useful, and I will speak to you again soon.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.